The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
When times are tough, as they have been for all of us these past few years, having close social ties can make all the difference. But if we all know that, why is it so hard for adults to make new friends? Tonight, we'll look into that and get some advice. Then, we'll learn about the efforts to recover the stories of an Ontario community of Black pioneers in 1850s Grey County. It's Thursday, February 23rd, and that's next on The Agenda. People talk pretty freely about how tough it can be to find the right romantic partner. What's much less common, maybe even taboo, is talking about finding new friends. But those platonic relationships can be just as important to life and sometimes even longer lasting. So we're going to talk about why it can be hard for adults to make friends. With Julie Erickson, clinical psychologist at Forest Hill Centre for CBT, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, Chloe Bowe, founder of Toronto Girls Social, David Lewis-Pert, therapist in training at Talk It Out Counseling Clinic, and David McGinn, columnist at the Globe and Mail. Welcome to you all. Thank you for making it in. I know it was a bit of a commute for all of you, but I really appreciate you guys for making the studio today. Julie, I'm going to come to you.
Sure.
How do friendships, or the lack thereof, affect our physical and mental well-being?
There's certainly a really large body of literature suggesting that the lack of social connection or social support is implicated in a wide variety of different mental disorders. There's even a research study that was published not too long ago implicating chronic loneliness as being equivalent to about smoking 15 cigarettes a day in terms of your risk of mortality. So it's very real in terms of the impact of friendships and social support, but also the absence of that connection and support can really come at a detriment to people.
All right. Now, a number of you have networks and have talked about loneliness and friendships and the importance. Chloe, I'm going to come to you. You founded Toronto Girls Social, an inclusive network created for women to meet up and have fun. What made you come up with this idea?
Yeah, it was at a time in my life where I was starting completely fresh. So I had actually left a long-term relationship and moved out on my own for the very first time. And my life was totally changing. I'm naturally an extroverted person, so I started vlogging about my experience online, being single in Toronto and making new friends. And I think a lot of people don't talk about friend breakups that can happen when you leave a relationship. And I was in the market for some new friends. So I was reaching out to a lot of people that I met through TikTok and through Instagram. And I had some girls over one night who from all different walks of life, different backgrounds, different lived experiences. And I was having so much fun. We had the best time. And I was like, how do I bottle this feeling and create it for other people? And at the same time, I was building this community online, talking about my experience, talking about my breakup, and the courage it can take to leave a long-term relationship. And that was really resonating with a lot of people and a lot of women. And I kept getting asked, how do you know it's time to break up? Or even, how do you make friends? I'm worried I'm going to be alone. I'm worried I'm going to be lonely. And so with that knowledge that people are looking for friendships, and with the experience that I had having so much fun making new friends, I was like, in my head, I just kind of came up with this idea. I'm like, I'm going to start an inclusive social club for women where the goal is just to have fun and make connections and make new friends and have cool experiences.
Sounds really cool. All right. Dave, I'm going to come to you. You got personal. You wrote a first-person essay for the Globe and Mail. This is pre-pandemic.
Yes.
Exploring why men have such a difficult time maintaining friendships. Did you find the answers?
I think I got close to some of the answers. Yes, so in 2019, same thing, long-term relationship ended. My marriage of 15 years ended. And I realized that I had close friends, but I hadn't been maintaining my close friends. And it really struck me at the time just how important it is to have friends, and how many guys, I think in their 40s, are really bad at maintaining their friendships. And so, I talked to experts like you and clinical psychologists and researchers, and, there's a lot of different answers, but what seems to be the common core of it is that guys have a really difficult time being vulnerable with one another. right? I think it's difficult for a lot of guys to see someone they maybe connect with or want to hang out with to say like, hey, do you want to hang out with me? There's a certain codes of masculinity, I think, that really prevent guys from making that step. And it's a real shame because, as we all know, friendship has huge amount of benefits for our well-being, for our physical health, for our mental health. And so that was basically the gist of it. Is the conclusion was, maybe just try to be a little bit more open with approaching people.
We'll definitely we'll come back to the masculinity part because that I think is a big conversation as well. David, you've been working with the Black Daddies Club and a recent initiative called Sunday Dinner. Tell us about those two.
Yeah, Sunday Dinners is an initiative that was started through Black Daddies Club, founded by Brandon Hay. It's an opportunity to bring Black men of all types together over a meal and a conversation. And so he began that during the pandemic online, and it turned out a number of folks. And so in the coming month, in March, for Black Mental Health Week, we'll be having a special Sunday dinner in person. It'll be an opportunity to have conversations about the things that impact Black men's mental health. It's a collaboration between Black Daddies Club, Talk It Out Clinic, which is the clinic that I work for, White Ribbon Campaign, and Asante Talks. And it's a day-long event that will be held in Mid-City to bring men together to have the conversations that need to be had.
Okay. All right. A lot of this conversation about loneliness has been sort of, has existed, of course, before the pandemic, but the pandemic has obviously exacerbated that. I want to read a recent BBC article published earlier this month that talks about how the COVID-19 pandemic has drastically changed the way we socialize, especially for people who are in their early careers. So it reads, while work has traditionally been a place to make connections, many of these young people have lacked opportunities as firms shift to hybrid, distributed, or remote working models. Social circles have shrunk after a lonely couple of years during the pandemic, and in some cases, were never established at all. This means some young people are seeking new ways of making friends. Chloe, I'm coming to you. Through your personal experiences, but also through Toronto Girls Social, what are your thoughts on that take? And I'm sure there's plenty of conversation about a lot of people who are struggling to make those connections, whether it's in a corporate office setting or just starting their careers.
Yeah, I think work from home life and the pandemic kind of ripped away a lot of social opportunities for people. And what I found in just connecting with my community, with Toronto Girls Social members, is there are not any like natural or organic opportunities to meet people and to make new friends. So that's what I wanted to create, because it's easy to say like, oh, you might meet someone at a gym class, or where else would you really meet anybody these days?
Like, no one meeting at the bar anymore. Nothing like that.
I mean, maybe if you're lucky, or if you like the bar scene, but maybe you don't like that. And if you're not in a community already, for example, maybe you're not into sports, you're not on a sports team, or you've graduated from school and now you're not around people of the same age or the same just sort of like experience or background or interests, then it can be really difficult to kind of meet people. There isn't a lot of opportunity.
All right, Julie, I'm going to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, two of the biggest predictors of friendship formation are proximity and similarity, right? So Chloe's speaking to those things. So we have less of the opportunity for, water cooler talk, right? And seeing the same people in the office or in the cubicle next door to you, that's going to make it challenging to like form and maintain friendships and to establish whether or not you're similar, whether you like each other, whether or not you have a similar sense of humor. It's hard to do that over Zoom meetings at work. So, yeah, it puts everybody at a disadvantage.
Now, a lot of the work that you do is with actually older adults in your practice. Are people more vulnerable to loneliness as they age?
Well, they certainly have a number of different factors that both change how they socialize and the opportunities that they have to socialize. So older adults can experience things like changes in mobility or physical health problems, or even caregiving responsibilities to a spouse or to grandkids, or even things like becoming a widow or a widower. All of these things can throw a wrench into opportunities that you have to socialize and really change how you're doing that with other people. And it's especially problematic for older adults, given that we know that social isolation is actually associated with increased risk of cognitive decline. So this population is especially vulnerable to the effects of loneliness.
All right, David, I want to talk about sort of the intersectionality, Black men specifically. What are some of the challenges faced by Black men rather, when it comes to building adult friendships?
Well, I don't think it's that dissimilar from the things that you spoke about, Dave. I think Black men are men, and we face all the same challenges that every other ethno-racial group would experience. I think in some instances there is the compounding of things. So not only dealing with the isolation as it relates to being vulnerable with other men and expressing your needs, but expectations that people put on you from outside, and that can be within the group or external to the group, I think take a toll on a lot of Black men. I think also we're in a period where there's a lot of shifting dynamics around roles and the roles for men in society. And that's landing on the shoulders of a lot of men, but more importantly, it's landing on the shoulders of a lot of racialized men who are dealing with that in addition to some other things like race, racism, and economic challenges and all these other sort of pieces and components.
All right. Dave, you had mentioned this in terms of your separation with your partner. You both saw you saw friendship in a new light after that. Do we tend to prioritize romantic relationships over platonic ones? And what does that look like?
I think when you're married and you have kids, you don't really have a huge amount of free time, right? I think this is one of the big components of making friends is how much time you have to spend with them. And when you're married with kids, you just don't have as much time as you might have otherwise. And on top of that, I think a lot of men make their wives their best friend. Right? So they go to their wives with their emotional problems or their joys or their successes, but they primarily see their wife as their best friend. And I think the problem with that is, one, I'm not sure if it's fair to women to make them shoulder all that emotional work. I'm sure they're happy about it most of the time. But then when it comes a time where you need your friends, you know, if you are separated or maybe you're just fighting with your wife or your wife says, go out, I'm sick of you, go see someone else, that's when you may realize you haven't put the time in with your friends and the consequences of that.
I think it was in the research that you did, there's a number of hours that's sort of associated with what a close friend is, what a, just sort of an associate is.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So there was a researcher, I believe he was at Indiana State University, who tracked how much time it takes to sort of go through a scale of friendship, right? Casual acquaintance to really good friend. And I think even for a sort of casual friend, it was something like just over 60 hours. But to become really close friends with someone, it was 200 hours.
That's some time.
That's some time, right? Yeah. And so I think the way I broke it down in the article was like, let's assume you and me hang out 3 hours at a time, right? That's almost 70 hangouts for us to become really good friends. A lot of guys just don't have time for 70 hangouts, right? Like it requires a lot of investment in time, amongst other things, to be really close friends. And if you're not putting that time into it, then therefore you're just not going to become close friends with people.
All right. David, I'm coming to you. Which one is more challenging? Making new friends or maintaining and keeping old friends?
I love that you saved that one. Make it as difficult as possible. I think that it's likely making new friends. You spoke earlier about the ways in which we build relationships, proximity and similarity. Most of our significant relationships began in school or in our home neighborhoods, where we had to be in relation with one another. And so I think for a lot of folks, especially older folks, people after their teens, struggle because there's not, as you said, a lot of opportunity to create that proximity. Yeah. And so I think that the challenge for a lot of adults is making new friends. I think that there are challenges, of course, with maintaining friendships, but once you have that core group, I think you're okay. Unfortunately, because of the way things are sort of rolling out, especially for younger people, there's not the opportunity for proximity. A lot of young people struggle with their relationships. Yeah. In fact, oftentimes many young people most of their relationships are parasocial. things that are online, people that they actually don't know all that well.
Right.
I might know what you ate for breakfast, but I actually don't know you. And so I think that contributes to some of what we've talked about in terms of this sort of epidemic of loneliness that's impacting all generations of people, despite technology seemingly connecting us, you know?
Yeah. And do you find with like you and your guy friends, when it comes to making new friends, do you find you and your guy friends are like, I'm good, man, I have my friends. I've known these guys since high school. I don't need new friends. And so I feel like if you have a core group of buddies, you're pretty good. But if you're someone who's like new to the city or trying to make friends, it's so hard to crack into that inner circle. Because I feel like men in particular, like I have my 2 best friends, I'm all right. But that said, you know, who are my 10 best friends? None of them are guys that I've known since grade 7, who I grew up with in Oakville.
Okay.
Right?
You have 10 best friends?
Well, I have 10 really close friends, let's say.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. But we're all, you know, we've all known each other since grade 7, grade 8. Yeah.
I think also the challenge with, you know, making friends in adulthood is there's an element of sort of social risk-taking that's involved, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like you need a willingness to step outside your comfort zone, which can be harder to do as people get older and we get used to who we know and what we know.
Right.
And especially as people get older, like in the later stages of life, we know there are some motivational changes that happen with time perspective changes. So as people perceive there's less time remaining in life, they start to focus in on the people that they know, the things that they know and enjoy, as opposed to branching out and trying a bunch of new things and meeting new people.
Yeah.
Chloe, I'm going to come to you. You talked about a little bit friendship breakups. I think this surprises a lot of people. I think most people are blindsided sometimes. Like, what happened? Why is this happening? You mentioned off the top, how are friendship breakups difficult to navigate, and how did you sort of navigate that?
Yeah, I think they're so difficult because we don't really talk about them like we talk about the breakup of a romantic partnership. And so I think a lot of people don't really necessarily have the skills to navigate a friendship breakup. And I think if we normalize them, they will feel a lot less scary and a lot less lonely and isolating. But there's research to show that our friendship cycles can go in 7-year periods. And as we grow and get older and change and our perspective increases or enhances, we may just grow apart from people. And so they're tough. I think they're tough to navigate because they don't often have like a set ending. Like a breakup might be final with your partner. You know, it's like we're breaking up, we're done, this is over. And a lot of times friendships sort of just fizzle out. So I think to navigate a friendship breakup, you really have to be strong on your communication skills and sort of be able to have open, honest conversations with your friends. And I think kind of not be afraid of that ending. But I think friendships can be scarce. And I mean, like, I think a lot of people are lucky if they have one good friend, 1 or 2 good friends. So it can be, it's a really scary experience.
Some have 10.
Yes.
Apparently. So, Julie, I want to come to you. We talked about sort of the end of some friendships. Let's talk prevention. What can be done to sort of prevent friendship breakups? Some run their course and that's it, but there's some work that needs to be done as well that can keep that going.
Yeah, absolutely. So things like open conversations about expectations, right? And letting other people know what they can realistically expect from you, I think is a really important conversation to have, especially if you're anticipating changes in a friendship dynamic, right? Like a move or someone becoming a parent, right? Or a change in job. Letting friends know, right? Like how these changes are impacting you. And if that means, right, they can rely on you for different things now, I think that's a really important conversation to have. I think the other piece is just in line with communication. I mean, it doesn't take much sometimes to let someone else know that you're thinking of them and that you care about them, right? So don't underestimate the value of small social gestures, whether it's a text or an email or a quick phone call, just to say, I'm thinking about you, I care about you, right? That's a way to put some deposits in that friendship bank account, right? So that there are difficulties ahead, right? Then, you know, you've got more than enough in your bank account.
All right, Dave, so you wrote about one important factor for heterosexual men to maintain friendships, which is the code of masculinity. Being vulnerable is admitting to another person that you need something from them. Their sympathy, their understanding, their forgiveness, their care, their advice, whatever it might be. And that's particularly difficult for men since it goes against everything instilled in us about the importance of self-sufficiency, stoicism, and never admitting weakness. Do you see this in yourself and the men around you?
To certain degrees, of course. Yeah, I think your point about this certainly applying to heterosexual men is true, in that all of us from a very young age are socialized to believe these certain ideas about what it is to be a guy, right? You should be stoic, you should be self-reliant, do not admit weakness. And I think me and my friends and a lot of men are good at counteracting that or rejecting it in certain ways. But it still applies to some degree to many, if not most of us, right? I don't think it's really either or kind of question. It's just sort of how much are you willing to be open? And I think when you begin to do it, it gets a lot easier. And the funny thing that I experienced with my guy friends is that when I began to do it just a little bit, and they do it just a little bit too, right? It's not, when we talk about men being vulnerable, it's not some huge show of emotion, right? It doesn't have to be. It could just say, I'm really struggling in my relationship right now. Can you give me some advice? Or I'm having a hard time at work. Those are the kinds of things that can open up these conversations to really unlock the benefits of friendship. So it's not a huge step to take, but it is something a lot of guys can feel uncomfortable about, which is typically why I think when men do that kind of thing, they pick their one best friend alone in a room, and they do it. They don't sit down with 5 or 6 buddies and say, get ready for this.
All right, David, I'm going to get your take on that as well.
Yeah. So, I think vulnerability matters. I think, as you said, finding at least that one person. But I would push against even the idea that I think men, if I can locate it there, I think we're doing our best.
Yeah.
And actually, I think we do quite well, given everything. And sometimes the way that we have these conversations, we sort of center around the deficiencies of men in our communication skills, our emotional literacy, and all these sorts of things, oftentimes measuring us against our female counterparts. Instead of looking at the ways in which men create space for vulnerability and relationship building, despite not necessarily having the adeptness at speaking about and articulating emotions in the way that many women have come to do. For example, I recently was with a friend, and similar to your story, he invited me over for a meal. And as he was barbecuing chicken, did we begin to have a conversation about his issues with his girlfriend and the feelings of isolation and issues around career. And so there are ways that I think men and a lot of people are attempting to adapt to and resist against loneliness and create relationships and repair where needed to. And I think men do a really good job of that. I think one thing that we do well is centering around activities. A lot of communication for men is nonverbal and paraverbal. And so it's through the pickup games and the basketball and the barbecues or whatever. I know those are all very stereotypical men things. We're actually building those bonds, and as you spoke about, we're getting in those hours that create that relation, and best friends.
Yeah. And I think in a weird way, one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that it made this a lot easier for guys. In that, prior to the pandemic, to admit to certain weaknesses, let's say, might have been a little bit more difficult for men. But in the context of a pandemic, everyone's going through some major things. And so to admit that you yourself are going through some things is not as stark of a difference, right? It's like, yeah, me too. We're in a pandemic. What do you want to talk about? I'm here to talk about you. And so that has always been kind of one of the interesting things I've found in the last few years, is that the guys in my life, maybe it's because of more long-lasting cultural changes, but I think it's certainly some kind of effect of the pandemic, is that they're a lot more open to talking about what's going on in their lives.
David, I do want to return to something that you did say when you were giving sort of a list of examples of things that people can do. Potentially, there can be barriers to accessing some of that stuff. And I am curious, how do social and economic circumstances affect the way people socialize and interact with each other?
Yeah, so I began by talking about the fact that men build relationship in proximity, but through activity. If there are financial and economic barriers in a city, in many cities, which is changing, gentrifying, locking people out of communal space, there's an absence, and I think some of what you do in the online space is trying to respond to that, but there's an absence of communal gathering spaces where we would come together, where there's a sort of organizing principle or a way of which we could all be together. We're all in one accord. we're all sort of divided up into these little tribal groups right now, and that just adds to that feeling of separation. If one is already experiencing financial hardship or not only finances, but even the way in which the city is laid out. There are parts of the city that exist in a bit of a silo and don't have the opportunities to go to a particular basketball court or go to the cottage with your friends. That it changes. One of the things, especially for young men, I'm finding in the ways in which they try to respond to this is the sort of uptake of streaming culture and gaming culture. Now, we know, and you're the psychologist, you could speak to how that might breed some instances of mental health and other concerns, but for a lot of men, it's where they build relationships. That as they're playing these games with someone who's maybe not even in the city, they're creating that connection. And so men of all types, I think, are responding as best they can, but financial and economic disparities can limit that for a lot of men.
I'm going to get you to respond to that as well.
Yeah, certainly I think when anybody's experiencing feelings of insecurity or scarcity, especially economically, right, I think friendships can get bumped down the priority list quite a bit, right? In terms of our hierarchy of needs, it's probably more important in our minds to take care of sort of our economic security and stability. I think to your point around video games, I mean, I'm a firm believer in taking any social opportunities that you might have and capitalizing on them, right? So video games and online communities provide a space for people to connect with one another, even if it's at a distance. Right. That's certainly better than nothing at all.
Right.
All right, Chloe, how do quality friendships contribute to setting healthy relationship standards and boundaries?
I mean, when you have quality friendships, you can learn from your friends and see you gain perspective from your relationships and your friendships. And I always say, I think it's so important, and I speak from a women's perspective, for us to really diversify our friend groups, meet people from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, many different life experiences, because when you have friends that have experienced things that maybe you're going through, you become empowered and you learn from them. You gain knowledge, you gain the skills just based off of seeing your friends kind of navigate the same stuff that you have done. Like, for example, I made a friend I actually made a friend online through work who I saw one day post about her breakup online, and she quit her job and she broke up with her partner and she sold her house. And I remember looking at that Instagram post like it was a car crash. I couldn't stop looking at it. And I remember messaging her saying, one day I can't wait to tell you how you inspired me to do what you did. And I think just having her as a friend, knowing that she was capable of doing something that I was so afraid of doing that I didn't think was ever possible for me, it was really empowering. And so I always try to give that message back to other women in my community. The more people you know, the stronger your network is, the more empowered you are to kind of learn different ways of going about life, different ways of knowing what's possible for yourself.
All right, we have a couple minutes left, and I have one question for all of you. I'm going to start with David. I'm always starting with you, putting you on the spot there.
I see.
What's one piece of friendship advice you would give to our viewers?
Space for grace. I think we're in a moment right now which is quick to cut and to sever. And grace is sort of the invitation to leave room for people, And in leaving room for others, we're also leaving room for ourselves. And one of the things you spoke about was, how our relationships help define how we are, even with ourselves. And so by giving the people in our lives that space, we are inviting them to give us that space back.
Julie?
I would say don't underestimate the power of small social gestures and bids for connection with other people. People can't see your social intentions, they can only see your behavior, right? So we need to keep that in mind and always make sure we're keeping the lines of communication open and making it clear to other people we're open to connection.
All right, Chloe.
I would say be open to friendships and connections with people that you may never have considered before, because I think they can just teach you so much and you can really support each other in different ways you never thought was possible.
All right, and Dave, I come to you. Also, you are a father, and so with that perspective as well, I'm curious, what's some advice there for all the fathers out there?
I'd say call your friends and tell them you love them. Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking to make friends, especially for fathers, put the time in to be with the friends that you have, let them know how important they are to you, and look for opportunities to make new friends, right? It's great to have a core group of friends, but like you said, new friends expand your world in wonderful ways. And so when you are out or you meet someone who you're interested in, who you like, who you feel you have some kind of chemistry with even, don't be afraid to just say like, hey, you know, do you want to go get a cup of coffee? Or I'll see you, are you here at the game next week? I'll see you here, like had a great time with you. Don't be locked into certain ways of behavior that's going to prevent you from making new friends.
Really, really great advice. Dave, Chloe, David, Julie, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I should mention that this discussion does remind me that we have the first episode of the second season of The Thread with Nam Kiwanuka, a show that we have out here on TVO, and we're actually tackling loneliness. And so that premieres on Sunday at 7 p.m. So I ask you guys to check it out, or viewers to check that out. Very important conversation. But thank you again for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Clearing land for new farms was tough work in the 1800s, but in Grey County, just south of Owen Sound and west of Collingwood, a group of Black pioneers did that work gladly as they established a new community and set down roots. It came to be known as the Negro Creek Settlement, and its history holds many lessons for today. Let's find out more from Nancy Lee, who is a researcher and genealogist and descendant of one of the original settlers there, and Ben Haywood McLeod, a community organizer and filmmaker. Welcome to our studios.
Thank you.
All right. So Nancy, I'm going to start with you. I know you have a request to share some of the Black pioneers from your research. Who are these people?
They were Lewis and Caroline Armstrong. They were Fielder and Ann Bowie, Isaiah and Catherine Chucky, James and Ellen Douglas, William and Maria Barnes Gordon, Elias and Louisa Earls, Henry and Priscilla Miller, Thomas Henry Miller Sr., Gazaway and Melinda Ross, Scott and Rachel White, and William and Jane Woods.
Now, that's not the first time that you recite that list. That's
No.
a list that you say all the time.
Yeah.
Why is it important that you do that?
It's important that we remember them. It's important that their names are said aloud so people don't forget.
All right. Ben, you have been collaborating on the website Negro Creek Archive, where your research, where you share the research on Black families who were amongst the pioneers of Grey County, Ontario in 1851. What brought the two of you together to work on this?
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing the names. I also feel like it brings them to the forefront in these conversations. And, you know, personally, when I'm coming up here, I'm bringing a lot of people with me. And those names are some of those people on that list. We got to know each other because I found Nancy through some of the research work that she's done. And I grew up right near Negro Creek. Mm-hmm. So it was a regular part of my day-to-day life. We would pass the road sign often when I was growing up. And to be honest with you, I didn't think very much about it. It just sort of was naturalized. It was in the landscape. But coming back home with my partner, who is not white, all of a sudden I was struck with the seemingly offensive and derogatory nature of this road marker. And we got to work on figuring out what we were going to do about that. Initially, I thought, okay, this sign needs to go. Clearly, it's offensive in this day and age. But it was only through reaching out and listening to the descendants of the original families of that area that I learned a vibrant history of my hometown that I otherwise hadn't known.
All right. Curious, how did that relationship for you sort of start as well?
The relationship to finding my ancestor?
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, with Ben. We'll start
with
with Ben,
Ben?
yeah.
Our relationship, Nancy. It's all coming out
It's
now.
all coming out now. Ben called me out of the blue and said that he had heard about the research that I had been doing from a few people and told me what he was trying to do and would I be interested in sitting down and meeting and just talking about the history and because nobody, I think, was sure what we wanted to do at first. We just,
that was the thing,
yeah.
is these road signs kept on getting vandalized and stolen. And so clearly and locally, there wasn't a lot of knowledge of the history. And so the idea was, let's bring in the experts, the descendants, the chief genealogists and archivists, and other descendants, Black history experts, but also neighbors who are living on the road, local farmers, my mom, just getting everybody together to figure out, okay, what are we gonna do about this history that has been forgotten and has been erased for far too long?
So we got together and we had our first gathering almost 2 years ago. And I talked about the history that I'd already gathered and the research that I'd already done. And Ben had done preliminary research on the census of 1851 and 52. And so we talked about that. We expanded. We gave knowledge and honor to the Saugeen and Ojibwe nations for being the original caretakers. And Adam was there to represent them. So we could talk about the entire history of the area, and then started expanding on the community and how the community must have reacted with those Black folk who were there.
I want to follow up with you, Nancy. You spent years going through the archives and digging into your family history. Curious, how has your intention evolved over time?
You know, when I first started to look for my roots almost 30 years ago, I didn't know where I was going. Ben's heard me say this a million times. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get there. And the road it took me was up the Garifraxa, which is now Highway 6, and it took me to Henry Miller's farm. Took me into Owen Sound, originally into their archives, and then I found, as I call him fondly, Old Henry, and connected the dots through the research and the documentation that I eventually found to prove that I belonged to him, or more importantly, he belonged to me. And for me, that was probably a huge turning point in my life and my sister's life. She was with me when we made that final connection, when we found the will, when we saw the names, when all of a sudden everything that I'd been doing for years just kind of went boom, 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 and fell into place. It was really emotional. One of my daughters was there, my sister's daughter. My sister got weepy, I got weepy, because we knew we'd found him. We knew we'd found home.
It's amazing. Ben, why do you think this piece of little-known history is important, not only to the descendants, but all Ontarians?
Yeah, I think oftentimes in Ontario, in Canada, we're realizing that certain stories have come to the forefront. It's a storied landscape. It's a storied geography, but other stories have been left in the margins. And we're all lesser because of that. Locally, I know that these stories have opened up doorways for people to reconnect with their own roots, because there are still descendants of these original Black settlers in the area, whether they know it or not, because there's a lot of, this wasn't a segregated community.
No.
You know, there was interactions with the Scottish neighbors, with the Irish neighbors, with all kinds of
There was
folks.
a lot of interracial marriages and relationships that went on quite regularly, eh, Ben?
Yeah.
It was quite normal. There was nothing unusual. Nobody raised an eyebrow back then. I'm not sure why it got to the point where it wasn't okay. But in those 1840s, 50s, 60s, right into the turn of the century, up in Grey County, it was quite normal to have these interracial relationships.
I want to follow up, Nancy. And you talked about amount of years that you put into the research. I saw the binder off camera with all of the information there. Why is it more difficult to trace the origins of Black settlers when, say, compared to white counterparts?
Well, we get to a wall. In my case, my Black ancestors came up on the Underground Railroad. So when I take them back past the time where I can document them, I can document Henry and his son, Thomas Henry, in Toronto, in the 1837 time frame. I'm quite sure they were mixed up with the rebellion, as a lot of formerly enslaved people were at the time. I know they came up from Maryland. So once I get back there, once I cross that river and I'm back into the States, you hit a brick wall. I've had some chances to think that I'm close to that plantation. No, there's a name that's been floating around the family for years. Whether it is actually, I have my DNA, and I do know that I'm related to white folk from down there that are obviously the former owners.
Wow.
DNA, which is a tug.
I was going to say.
That's a difficult, it was very difficult for me personally at first, recognizing that I'm related to them, and this wasn't a consensual relationship, like I'd be, say, related to my mother's family in England, because that's a marriage there. So when that first hits you, it's a bit of a setback, because you're looking for your Black roots.
Right.
You're trying to find those steps that your ancestors took. Because in my work, that's what's important to me. I want to walk the road. I want to feel what they felt. You know, I often think when Henry was on his land and he had that piece of paper, and I can just imagine how he must have felt. He's on this land and he knows it's his, and he's lying there and he's looking up at the stars, and he's got this piece of paper that he cannot read, but he knows it says this is his. And for the first time in his life, he realizes he owns something, and he's not the something that's being owned.
All right, Nancy, a big part of your research, of course, revolves around the family tree of your ancestor, Henry Miller. You found the will of Henry Miller, in which he asked his land to be inherited by his descendants. What was the significance of that?
Well, he was ensuring that the land that gave him freedom was going to stay within his family. So he made, he documented it that the farm was going to his son, Thomas Henry Miller Sr., and it could not be sold while he was alive. So for at least his son's lifetime, he was ensuring that it would stay within the family. All that hard work that he did was going to stay within the family, and it did.
What did it mean to own farmland in Ontario as a Black person in the 1800s?
I think it meant everything. It meant everything. Just like as I said before, you know, you own something instead of being the something that is owned. You know, you found freedom. You have a chance to live the life that you choose, not the life that someone else is forcing you to live. So when you have that piece of land and that you can raise your family, your descendants, and it's yours. And as long as you work hard, which they're not above doing because they know what hard work is, probably better than most, I think it was everything to them.
Ben, you were one of the creators behind the short film As Is, Where Is. We actually have a clip of that. We're going to play a little short clip right now.
So hard. You're thinking about it. What my people went through.
It's a short little snippet there. They're definitely going to have to check to watch that. But tell me about sort of that process in terms of connecting with a lot of those stories. You can see the emotion behind it. But what do you hope this film brings to viewers?
Yeah, so in terms of the process, basically, after I found out about the history of this place and the road sign and the lack of awareness, I went to Carolyn and Sylvia Wilson, who run a Black History and Culture Museum right outside of Meaford, Collingwood area. And we sat down and we talked and figured out, okay, well, how can I bring my skills to this? And I knew that I had some great friends, Michaela, who was the director, and Jason, who's the co-director, super talented people. And I said, okay, well, let's spend the summer and let's tell this story. Let's meet some people. So we met the neighbors, we met descendants, and we held those stories with them. Now, in my case, we made the film. We were very happy with it, and I'd be so happy if folks watched it and enjoyed it as well. But the relationships that were created because of that film extended well beyond the film. So neighbors were now getting in touch with me when the road sign was being stolen. And then I was getting in touch with descendants, and it was sort of on me to break the news to them that the only monument to their history was disappearing so often. So that's sort of how it happened. Is it was a network, and it was a network that formed, and it's been a network that has turned into something that's quite important for me. And that clip of Gail, just there earlier, she just launched a book of hers, and I was so happy to be there at her book launch, and it had a whole bunch of local support too.
And Gail's my second cousin, by
That's
the way.
right. Yeah.
Gail and I are both descended from Henry and Priscilla Miller and Thomas Henry Miller, so we come right down that line.
Right.
I'm from his oldest son, Thomas Henry Miller Sr.'s oldest son, and Gail is from almost his youngest son, so there's like a 45-year difference.
Did you know Gail before you did your journey?
Gail and I had met a while back. I had presented my branch of the family tree at the Emancipation Celebration Festival, which Thomas Henry Miller Sr. is a co-founder of. This year will be its 161st continuous year of celebrating the emancipation from the British emancipation. So I met Gail's older brother first, and I presented our branch of the family tree, and he came up and met me and had me walk with him, and we had a lovely talk, and he told Gail about me, and we reached out, and we became pen pals, basically, and chatting. And the first time we physically met, funny enough, because we kept passing. We would be at the same thing and be so many people, and we just missed each other. And it was at Ben's first gathering. And when I walked in, her and I both busted out crying.
Yeah.
Because for years we had been talking and emailing and texting and sharing our separate family branch stories. And then we finally got to meet. She is an absolute lovely woman.
All right, I'm going to come follow up on the family tree, but I want to come to Ben first. You mentioned a meeting here, and I want to talk about, we mentioned the lands that this was first on, and when we talk about the settlers, but we talk about the Saugeen and Ojibwe nations, and your group had First Nation members join your committee meetings, and I think this is a very interesting sort of way that understanding how the relationships with First Nations and different settlers. So Ben, what's the significance about understanding the difference between settler communities?
Sure. So from the get-go, if you're in Canada, you're on treaty lands. So we recognized that we were on Treaty 45.5 territory locally. And what that meant was that the traditional stewards and the ancestral stewards of those lands were the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Chippewas of Newash and the Chippewas of Saugeen. And what that meant is that in the work, it's a work about sort of addressing histories, beautiful histories, but also histories of dispossession, of violence, of which there are many connections between Black and Indigenous stories there. It's about addressing that in a way that rebuilds kinship relationships, which is to say that, Gail and Nancy are reuniting, building strong bonds again. Yeah. It also means that we're getting to know our Indigenous friends and neighbors. I was getting to know my Williamsford friends and neighbors. and I mean, I've said this before, so is my family. Like it was really important to me that those gatherings were a time where we could, in some way, live out the legacy of the history, which is to say it was a place for freedom, it was a place for emancipation, it was a place for liberation.
Yeah.
And it was important that that was clear each step along the way. So, I mean, having First Nation members, chiefly our friend Adam from the Environment Office present, meant that the conversation around how we were going to preserve and commemorate this history was markedly different than it would be without including them.
How so?
Well, for one thing, honoring the connections between Black and Indigenous. So this is getting kind of into the weeds a little bit, but in the 90s, the road name was changed by the township. They changed it because it was politically incorrect, they said. Now, they changed it to a white settler's name, thereby erasing the Black history in general. And at that township meeting, when descendants and community friends came together 28 years ago, First Nation members were present there in solidarity as well.
Awesome.
And that was Adam's father.
Yeah.
So, and others, and others. And
It's always been important to include and to honor their presence for all of us, and
That's right.
as descendants, and even as in Ben's. I won't say job, but what Ben's done within the community and worked towards. We just kind of took it for granted, didn't we?
Yeah.
That this is just something you should do. Like, if we don't want our history erased, we're fighting to keep that, and so are they. Even more so, because they were here first.
yeah.
Fascinating, interesting. Really, in terms of that relationship. Nancy, I want to go back to the family tree.
Yeah.
That family tree has now expanded. You have 5 children.
I have 6
6 children.
Yes.
8 grandchildren
so far.
so far.
Yeah.
What kind of impact do you hope your research brings to their identities? And I, you sort of talked about that tug. That how do you reconcile some of these histories that you may not want that do hurt,
Yeah.
but that are important part of history?
I'm multiracial. So, and my mother happens to be white. She was a young girl from Carlisle, England, when she came here. So, and my father, even though identifying as a Black man, both his parents were multiracial. His father, who was from Maysville, Kentucky, and came up to Canada in 1914, was multiracial. His mother, who is a miller, was multiracial. It's important that my kids, I think all children, should understand where they come from, but more importantly, who they come from. As I've learned, and I've shared what I've learned with my children, I think the pride that they knew was in me, because I've always been really comfortable in my skin. I understood exactly what the two sides were, but I was very comfortable in my skin. For me, I wanted my kids to be comfortable in their skin no matter what shade it was. And the pride that they feel, they share that with me, from me telling them the stories, not just about old Henry, but everybody right down to my dad, and then all the way back up. It's important, I think, for every child to know, because if they didn't walk their road, we're not walking ours.
Right.
And even for my grandkids, they're very proud of knowing where they are. If I can take a second, my little grandson was in school this month, and it's Black history, and they're teaching Black history. Well, they were talking about Obama and Frederick Douglass, and Mr. Obama's a very nice man, and he videoed me because we were away down in Mexico.
Mr. Obama?
And Mr. Obama was very, very, was a very nice man, and he wanted to tell me about it.
Right.
And he also wanted to remind me that he did put his hand up, and he was very proud of the fact that his Grammy was Black and she lived there in Barrie. So I don't know if he recognized that it was different history, because it's Black history. But the point to me was that he was proud of me.
That's awesome.
And of the color that I was, because it didn't make any difference. And that he had, and he also told his teacher he had other things in him, like he was part Indigenous, and he was French, and he was German. And he's probably what everybody's going to be in another 50 to 100 years. And as I like to tell him, you're the first. But it's that he recognizes, as a 7-year-old child, how important it is to be proud of who he is.
That is awesome.
And that's all I want to give my kids and my grandkids.
We have about a minute left. I have a question for both of you. I'm going to come to Ben first. In your opinion, how should history be told and taught?
Well, for one thing, connecting to Nancy's story about her grandson, I think that we would do well to pay attention to what's in our own backyards, to learn the history of the land that we are on, because that's going to be the most meaningful, and I think it's going to allow us to find our roots wherever we end up. you know, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful that the descendant community is so strongly attached to their roots. And I know that for some neighbors of mine, because of various histories of dispossession or whatever, they aren't able to find their genealogical roots. But at the very least, they can find their roots in the land.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one piece, is find out what's in your own backyard and listen to the stories in the margins. The second piece is listen to the voices that for so long have been silenced, and learn the stories about your hometown or your area, your city, that haven't been acknowledged for a long time, because you might learn something about yourself and you might learn something about where you're from.
Get the last word, Nancy.
Well, Ben and I talk about this all the time, about, you know, why can't history, when they teach it, be the way it was lived? And that's what I always say to Ben. That's my dream, that when they teach history, that it's going to be about the way it was lived, not about, you know, Joe Smythe, who was an Englishman, and Mr. MacLeod, who was a Scottishman, but about everybody, including Henry Miller and William Gordon, who happened to be men of color. It doesn't necessarily have to be, it should never be separated. Just tell us the way it was lived, and then we'll have the true history of who we all are. And I think that's the important thing. That's what I strive to do.
Nancy, Ben, thank you so much for your stories and shedding light
Thank
on the
you.
history of Ontario.
Thank you for having us.
That is the agenda for Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. Tomorrow, Nam Kiwanuka sits down with renowned author Lawrence Hill about his newest book, his first for young readers. I'm Jan Jaganathan. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and Nam, we'll see you tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.